Good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 2. It's so good to have you all here with us. Brittany France couldn't be here yesterday. Good. Watch the replays. The replays are posted. We'll post the link to the replays too. Again, if you watch the replays on YouTube, post your comments below. We'll try to get to your questions today live on the call as well. So good to have you here. So good to have you here. And I appreciate you all so much because, as I said, parenting is the most important job, I believe, on the planet right now. And, I have my oldest daughter has 3 kids, a 9-month-old, a 4-year-old, and a 5-year-old. She's having a tough time. Like, she's really having a tough time right now. 3 kids is hard, right? I remember the 3rd kid was hard. And nobody's sleeping. They've all got colds. She's a romance author, so she's under a deadline for a book and she's trying to get her book done while she's parenting these 3 small kids. Her husband works 12-hour shifts. It's hard. And I keep reminding her, this is the most important job and you're doing a good job. You're doing a good job. Yesterday, we talked about the broader lens through which we can understand our children and our own conditioning. We talked about what do we bring to the table as parents and how does that shape our perspective and how do we really, really see our kids? How do we really look at our children and not lump them into little categories? Children do this, children do that, but rather see them for who they are. What we learn in human design is that we're all different. We have different needs, we have different hardwiring, and we have to understand each one of our individual kids. I don't know if any of you have more than one kid. I have 5 kids, and 5 of them are my own biologically, and I have 3 stepdaughters, and they're all like crazy different, right? Nobody's the same. And so we have to know how to really see our kids. I also invited you yesterday into a new paradigm. One that's rooted in compassion, that's rooted in energy awareness, and a willingness to see children as whole, wise beings, not some lump of human being that needs to be formed and forced and sort of, forced into being a real full-fledged human. We talked about how children have natural needs that feed their development. I'm going to review that slide for you all today because several people posted that they wanted to see that slide. I talked about how when children misbehave, it's a form of communication, that they need to feel loved, they need to experiment and explore, they need to feel capable, they need to feel valuable, they need to feel important. And when we understand that they have these basic needs, and by the way, we do too as parents, right? That when they have these basic needs and we start to see them through the lens of those needs, rather than believing that our job as parents is to force and form them into a certain way of being, right? Get in the box, right? We don't do that. When we can really see our kids, then we can parent with clarity and connection. We can really support our children in evolving and growing into the person they were born to be. I like to think of it sort of like this, that as parents, we're sacred stewards for our children, right? They're already whole beings when they show up. They already have their story encoded in their being. Our job is to hold space for that story to unfold in a healthy way. I also talked yesterday about how registration for the Family Coach Certification Training is now open and will be open until September the 26th. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that this morning at the end of our presentation. I want to make sure that if you are excited about that opportunity, that you get all the information you need and get an opportunity to get your questions answered. I also want to just let you know that I have an announcement for you at the end of this call because I forgot to tell you something yesterday. And I also want to remind you, just like yesterday, I'm going to leave time after the presentation for your questions. So I will go through the presentation today. My goal is to finish it at the top of the hour. If you have any questions, if they come up while you're listening, please make sure you go down to the bottom, go to the Q&A button, hit the Q&A button, and put your question in the Q&A, not in the chat, because if you put it in the chat, I'm going to lose it, and I don't want to lose it. Your questions are really important to me. So put your questions in the Q&A section. So today we're going to take another step forward. We're going to talk about child development, but we're going to do it in a little bit of a different way than maybe you've heard it before. So we're not going to look at child development in the terms of developmental milestones and behavior, although we'll touch on that a little bit. We're going to look at child development through the lens of energy, because behavior is important. It's really only, though, the surface level. How our kids behave is just the surface level. Every child, just like every adult, has a unique energy blueprint. That's the human design piece. We have to understand the energetics of child development, because each child's going to do those phases and those milestones differently, right? Some kids are going to really get into power struggles when they're 2 and early teens. Some kids not so much, but the energetics are still the same. And we have to understand those energetics, the aura, the energetic field, because when we can support a child in the healthy energetic maturation, we're giving them a foundation of lifelong resilience. So we're going to be looking at how the chakra system from the Hindu chakra system and human design centers give us a deeper understanding of what children are really growing through, not just what they're doing. And I want to just stress, when we understand how a child's energy field develops, we start to see more clearly what they're trying to accomplish at each stage of growth, not just physically and mentally, but energetically and emotionally. And we begin to understand that these energetic developments, these milestones, when they are interrupted or rushed or skipped or shut down, as they were for many of us, it creates fractures in how our energy operates. And when our energy is fractured, then we internalize that energy of not feeling safe, not feeling loved, not feeling seen. And these stories that we start to internalize, they don't just live in the mind, they live in the energy field. And that energy field becomes the blueprint for everything that we create in our lives. So today is about helping you see what's really unfolding in your child's development, not just through behavior, but through their energy. And to remember and to realize that when we can support the healthy unfolding of the energy field, the aura, we don't just help children thrive now. We strengthen their lifelong capacity for resilience, self-regulation, self-love, and their creative power, because now they're not wasting energy trying to uphold a false identity that doesn't really fit. This is the heart of what it means to parent by design, not just by the rules, not just with rewards and consequences, although there's a place for all of that, right? But by knowing how to work with your child's energy, responding to what their soul is growing through, and strengthening the energy field where all growth begins. So let's get started. All right, here we are, day 2, design and development, where a child's quantum human design intersects with the science behind child development. So before we get started, let's do some housekeeping. First of all, if you haven't done so, please join our Facebook group. We've got some great conversations happening over there. We'll post the link for our Facebook group in the chat. So lots of opportunities for you to not only get your questions answered there as well, but to also post your reflections. We're gonna do, we have daily replays and reflections. Those are posted in the Facebook group, but you'll also get an email with the replay link. All of our replays are on one page. So if you got the replay link yesterday and you can't find the new one, it'll be on that page. Again, if you're watching those replays on YouTube, you can post your comments and questions below on the YouTube video. We are following and tracking those, and we'll make sure that we bring those questions to tomorrow's presentation as well. Make sure you have your workbook for this series so you can follow along day to day. We'll post a link for the workbook in the chat if you didn't get one yesterday, or if you can't find yours, or if you want to start over. It's up to you. We have giveaways. We'll be selecting 2 people a day at random to receive a quantum human design card deck, an understanding human design book, a human design workbook, and the encyclopedia of quantum human design. So that's a big stack of stuff. So if you wait to the end of today's call, we're going to announce our day 1 giveaway recipients. So we have 2 recipients today. I'll announce those recipients at the end of the call. As I said, please check out the replay page. It's always there for you for the next couple of weeks if you want to catch up or just re-listen. I know a couple of you were saying you wanted to go back and take notes. For those of you who I may not have had the privilege of meeting personally yet, my name is Dr. Karen Parker. I'm the founder and creator of Quantum Human Design and the Quantum Alignment System. I have written multiple best-selling books. I am the world's top-selling human design author. I have a PhD in integrative medicine. I've been an EFT, emotional freedom techniques practitioner since 2000, a life coach since 1998. I've been a certified parent educator since 1995. As I said, I also have 8 children. I've been in the trenches. I studied with and worked for Ra Uru Hu, the founder of traditional human design. I've been teaching human design since 1999. I'm a Quantum University guest lecturer, a TEDx presenter. You can find my TEDx talk on TED.com. I'm the host of the Quantum Revolution podcast, and I am an Omega Institute, Shift Network, and Humanities Team faculty member, and I am very honored to be here again with you all. So yesterday, I introduced you to this model, and I talked about how to really see our children and to really bypass some of our preconceived ideas and our conditioning and our expectations, we have to learn how to really look at our child. And I talked about how when we're looking at our children, if you can imagine you're looking at your child through a window, and some of you informed me what these 4 panes in the window are called. They're called lights, L-I-T-E-S. Anyway, if you're looking through this window and you're looking through these 4 panes, you really want to be able to see your child clearly. And what can support you in being able to see your child clearly is to know your child's human design, to understand where your child is developmentally, because sometimes children go through predictable behavioral phases that create challenges. I talked about yesterday how when I first taught parent education, my classes were always full of 4-year-olds. I mean, parents of 4-year-olds, not 4-year-olds, but parents of 4-year-olds who were very concerned about whether their children were going to grow up into thieves and criminals, because 4-year-olds are evolving their moral conscience. They're learning about moral conscience, and 4-year-olds lie, cheat, and steal and do other interesting things. So when we understand, oh, that's what 4-year-olds do, we don't have to think about and worry about whether they're going to go to jail later on as adults. We talked about our own personal conditioning and how our own lived experiences will influence how we interpret our children's behavior. And also, of course, your children's personal experiences also oftentimes affect their behavior. And one of my clients that I was coaching had a son. His dad worked for the Secret Service, and his dad was gone a lot and traveled a lot, and he had been very, very close with his grandfather. And his grandfather had a massive heart attack while he was at his grandfather's house. His grandfather was babysitting him, and he died while he was at his granddad's house. That was a huge, huge part of this boy's story. And when we looked at this boy's behavior and what was going through, he was processing so much grief through his behavior. And if you didn't understand his lived experience, and that's a pretty dramatic experience, but if you didn't understand that, you might have misinterpreted some of his misbehavior, which was really just him working through his own grief. And we talked about mistaken motivations, that everybody, kids and adults alike, are hardwired to have certain core energetic needs. And when those needs don't get met appropriately, we learn to misbehave to get those needs met in inappropriate ways. Today, we're going to look through the top right part of the window. We're going to look at child development. Tomorrow, really make sure you bring your charts tomorrow. I want you to bring your charts and bring your kids' charts or your grandkids' charts. Because tomorrow we're going to look at hardwiring in the chart, how our hardwiring sometimes creates core energetic needs, and how to interpret or decode your child's behavior so that you can start to recognize the cause and the source of their misbehavior and start to interpret it better so that you can support your child in learning how to get their energetic needs met appropriately instead of through misbehavior. Yeah, many of you asked me yesterday in the Facebook group to see this slide again, so I'm posting it again for you here. So if you wanted a refresher on this slide, take a screenshot of it. I won't be mad. I invited you for this week, while we're talking about harmony at home, I invited you to think about these new beliefs and maybe practice believing them for a few days. And the new beliefs that I invited you to sort of internalize are children misbehave because they don't feel loved. That doesn't mean they're not loved, but they don't feel loved. They don't feel valuable. They don't feel like it's safe to be themselves. They feel scared. They're struggling with their emotions. They don't trust themselves. They don't know what to do. They feel powerless, or so it's obvious, but we forget it sometimes, right? They're hungry, tired, stressed, or frustrated, right? So I wanted to, again, some of you asked to see this again, so I'm posting this here. When we adopt these new beliefs, when a child misbehaves, it's because they're communicating something. And so I invited you to explore these beliefs and practice holding them for this week, because when we can understand that, oh, my kid's doing something I don't want him to do, and you have these beliefs, then you can start to understand, oh, what's going on here? They're not bad kids, right? They're misbehaving because something's going on, and I need to decode this misbehavior to support them so that they can learn how to ask for what they need and want appropriately. And of course, this is true for us too. All of these things apply to us as well, as parents, as humans. We all need to feel loved and valuable and safe, and not feel scared, and not struggle with our emotions, and trust ourselves, and know what to do and feel powerful. And of course, the reality of it is, I don't know how it is for you all, but if I'm hungry, tired, stressed, or frustrated, I am not a pleasant human being to be around, and I need to eat. So, all right. So we have been talking a lot about misbehavior as a way of expressing unmet energy needs. And that our job, when we live from these beliefs, our job as parents or grandparents or educators is to help children learn appropriate ways to get these needs met. Imagine if you grow up as an adult and you know how to say to your partner, hey, I'm really needing some attention here. I'm feeling like we're not connecting. Can we set some time aside and really connect with each other instead of being pissy in the kitchen, right? So when we train our children and support our children in learning how to get their needs met appropriately, they grow up into healthy adults that are able to really tap into what they need and want in healthy, sustainable ways. So let's talk about some factors that influence energy needs. And again, as I said, today we're talking about child development, but we're going to talk about child development with a little bit of a twist. Okay, we oftentimes look at child development around developmental milestones, like are they walking, are they talking, are they, are they climbing, are they jumping on one foot, are they reading? And those are also always important to pay attention to. So I'm definitely not saying ignore major developmental milestones. But today I want to invite us into a little bit of a different exploration around child development, because if we look at milestones and the milestones that say your pediatrician is using to measure your child's development, those milestones are really wide and big, depending on whatever the milestone might be. Like walking, you can have kids that can walk at 7 months. I had one of those. And you have kids that don't walk until 18 months, and all of those fall within the range of normal. Those are milestones, and they're great and they're good to know, but it doesn't really tell you what's going on with the kid. What are they learning? How are they being human? How are they growing into fulfilling their role as human beings in the world? And when you can understand that in conjunction with child development, you start to recognize what your job is as a parent and how to better support your children. So we're going to look at child development through the lens of the chakra system, which is part of the esoteric origins of human design. And there's a relationship in human design between the 7 chakras from the Hindu chakra system and the 9 centers in the human design chart. So we're going to look at the relationship. You're going to hear me talk a lot today about chakras. And before we talk about this, I want you to think about the correlation between the chakras and the human design centers, because it's going to help you understand a little bit more about not only child development, but how these centers operate and some of the themes that are held in these centers archetypically. So in 1781, according to the more esoteric information in human design, the human energy field evolved. Remember how yesterday I talked about how we're on the cusp of an evolution, that we are at the end of a 400-year-long cycle and the beginning of a new 400-year-long cycle. Well, during this 400-year-long cycle that we are about to exit, The human energy field evolved. It had a spontaneous evolution. You might think of it as an evolution in the energy field, or you might think of it as an evolution in consciousness. As we move towards 2027, the chart itself is also going to go through another change in the way the hardwiring works, which is again why as we come to the end of this 400-year-long cycle, things are so different. And things with our kids are so different because they are almost, energetically moving into a new era and a new way of being human. And we as parents have to catch up with that. We have to be present to that. And I will say, this is totally anecdotal and not scientific, but as I said, I have 8 kids. Our oldest are 35 and 36. Our littlest is 16. There's a big difference between that 16-year-old and those 35 and 36-year-olds. Just in terms of who they are, what drives them, how they create in the world, it is a very different experience. And those of you who are grandparents, maybe you see that too with your grandkids. I know my grandkids seem a little bit different than my kids. So in 1781, we shifted from being a 7-centered being into a 9-centered being. Okay, and so we have 2 chakras that actually split. So the heart chakra split into the G center and the will center. So if you can see my cursor moving, you'll see here's the heart chakra in the middle, it's green. You'll see these green arrows pointing to the G center or the identity center and the will center. So that's the first set of new centers. The solar plexus chakra, which is all about empowerment and creativity, that the solar plexus chakra split into the spleen center, which is the triangle on the left of the chart, and the emotional solar plexus, which is the triangle on the right of the chart. Okay, so we have this change in our hardwiring. I'm pointing this out to you because I'm going to pretty much talk about development through the lens of the chakras. And I want you just to file away in your head that when I talk about the heart chakra, I'm talking about the G center and the will center. When I talk about the solar plexus chakra, I'm talking about the spleen center and the emotional solar plexus. And I'll remind us of that. And it sounds complicated. It's not going to be that complicated. All right, so let's do a quick review of the chakras and the centers that they are correlated with in human design. So the root chakra is archetypically associated with financial status, money, security and safety, and family of origin issues. It is also in human design a pressure center, and it's the center for adrenaline energy. So it is also a place where burnout can show up and anxiety can show up. So something just to think about with this correlation and these centers. The sacral center correlates to the sacral chakra. And this is a place where energetically and archetypically we hold the energy for physical desires, sexuality, creativity, life force, work energy. In human design, we know that when this center is open or undefined, so if you're a manifestor, projector, or reflector, this is a place where we have to learn how to know when enough is enough. This is a source of physical vitality in the chart. And inner wisdom, especially for our generator types, right? This is where the sacral center, that lives. The emotional solar plexus and the spleen correlate to the solar plexus chakra in the Hindu chakra system. And these 2 centers or this chakra are associated with personal power and intuition, self-trust, emotional wisdom, courage, and creativity. And when we talk about creativity here, I'm not necessarily talking about art and poetry and painting. I'm talking about the ability to translate an idea into its manifested form. And when we talk about it in this way, we're talking about being able to hold the energetic frequency for the manifestation. So faith lives here. Faith lives in the emotional solar plexus. And the opposite of faith, fear, lives over on the other side in the spleen. So this chakra or this center sets us up to learn how to create out of faith or with fear. And obviously we want our kids to learn how to create from faith and not out of fear. The heart chakra correlates to the G center and the will center. And these two centers are associated with direction in life, love, service, self-worth, spiritual maturity, lovability. And here's a big one here: purpose and meaning live in these two centers in human design. And we know now, actually, I just got through going through a bunch of new research that came out this year, that when people have a sense of purpose and meaning, and this includes kids, and when they feel connected to a sense of purpose and meaning, they become resilient. They're able to weather the storms of life better because they have something bigger than themselves that they are moving towards. And that gives us stability. And this is the most important part of this. It gives us stability in our life path and our life direction. We stay connected to the self. We stay connected to our purpose and meaning, and we don't get lost in the shifts of life, right? The ups and downs that life brings. So let's take just a brief second, and I want to unpack for just a minute the G center. Because the G center, I think, plays a big role in parenting, because this is where our sense of self-love and self-acceptance lives in the chart. This center, when it is white in the chart, if you have this center white on your chart, or you have a child that has the center white in the chart, this is oftentimes a prescription or a curriculum for learning how to love yourself. The shadow of the center, when it's white or open, is to question your lovability. And when you have a child that's hardwired to question their lovability, it makes your parenting job a little bit interesting. I have a child that has an open G center, and it never failed. If I had to discipline her, and we have to discipline kids sometimes. If I had to discipline her, the very first thing she always said is, "You don't love me." And I had to really be clear with her about boundaries and consequences have nothing to do with how much I love you. In fact, I love you so much that I'm going to set these boundaries and these limitations on you because I want to keep you safe, right? Especially when she was a teenager. That was the kid that almost killed me. So when this is defined in your chart, if it's colored in your chart, then your challenge, your curriculum is to learn to love and accept yourself, because you don't really change that much. Who you are is who you are. But here's the piece that's really important. Self-love and self-acceptance, regardless of how it's playing out in your personal story, is a calibrating energy. It influences the direction your life takes you, or the direction you take your life, if you don't want to word it in a passive way. And really what the G center teaches us is that for us to optimize our life path and our life direction, we have to love ourselves. These are codes that are held within the gates of the G center. We have to love ourselves. We have to feel powerful. We have to feel like we are here for something special and unique. We have to let go of the past on a regular basis and not define ourselves by the limitations of the past. We have to be connected to spirit, have some kind of spiritual relationship that anchors us in something bigger than ourselves, our ego. We have to be physically vital and know how to nurture and love and take care of the body. We have to believe that we are worthy of being supported and allow for that support. And we have to have compassion, not only for ourselves, but for others. And that these core energies are essential parts of resilience and creating direction in your life path. So the center is, of course, very, very important. Raising kids that know and understand how to love and accept themselves is a huge bonus, is a huge superpower we can imbue our children with, that create a natural resilience and a deep alignment and connection with their right path, right place, their place of purpose, and their place of contribution to the world. The throat center correlates directly to the throat chakra. This is the center for manifestation and communication, attention, recognition, and authentic expression. And tomorrow, we're going to talk a lot about the throat center because it is a very interesting influence on behavior and communication. The Ajna center correlates to the third eye chakra, or sometimes also called the Ajna or the Ajna. This is the center that is responsible for knowing and knowledge, beliefs, and certainty. So we definitely want the center to be operating optimally, because this is where we store our beliefs, and we have good beliefs. We have good beliefs about ourselves and the world. That actually creates emotional regulation in the body, and it makes it much easier to attain and sustain a state of heart coherence, which is a highly creative state. And last but not least, the crown chakra correlates to the head center. This is the center associated with divine connection, inspiration, and also pressure. And oftentimes that pressure is the pressure to figure out, the pressure to know, and sometimes can even be a little bit of the fear of the unknown. And so the pressure comes from the fear of not knowing or the fear of not having the information you need. All right, that's just a brief overview of chakras. I want to bring us back now to how do the chakras, these energy centers, these spinning portals of energy in the body, how do these chakras develop in children? Because we think, and I think sometimes when we teach human design, we sort of have this idea, this baby's born and it's like this full-on energetic being. And really what we see is that the energy field of a small child is not mature until the age of 7. And so even if you know a small child's human design, their energy field isn't all the way mature until the age of 7, which means we really have to be incredibly mindful of how we nurture small children, because they need the presence of the consistent presence of a loving adult. Because here's what happens with small children. Because they are born and their energy field, their aura is not mature, their chakras, their energy portals are kind of filtered. They almost, if you're a kind of person who can visualize energy, and some of you can, because I always attract, woo-woo people, right? So you might see when you look at a small child that some of the energy portals, some of the centers, some of their chakras are almost kind of muffled looking. They have almost like a filter over them or a screen over them. And that's because small children really aren't good at digesting, if you will, or processing earth energy all by themselves. So what that really means is that children from birth to 7 really need the consistent presence of a loving adult. And I know we talk about attachment parenting. I would say really what we see is that they actually really need attachment parenting. They need to be in the energy field, especially when they're little, the energy field of a consistent caregiver. Because what will happen is a small child will go out as they continue to mature. They'll go out and experience the world, but then they've got to come back in and sit in your lap or snuggle with you or cuddle with you, because when they're, or nurse, because the breasts are minor chakras. When they are sitting inside of your energy field in that lovey, cuddly way, what they're also doing, in addition to getting the nervous system regulation and the nervous system stimulation that they need, because small children need 46, start tallying, 46 healthy, loving physical connections a day for optimal neurological development. By the way, adults need 14 to sustain emotional well-being. So you need 14 hugs a day to keep your emotional field healthy. But they also need those touches, not just for neurological development, but for energetic development, because they're sitting in your aura and they are borrowing your energy field, your chakra system, your centers in human design to help them process earth energy, because they can't do it by themselves yet. So when we start to think about how we take care of small children, and how one of the things that's gotten kind of fractured in our modern life is separating children from primary caregivers and putting them in facilities, daycare settings, where maybe the ratio of adults to children isn't that great, and they're not getting that opportunity to sit in an adult aura in a healthy way until they can finish processing that energy. That's actually dysregulating in many levels for small children. I am not saying this, please, I want to be really mindful when I say this, because my intention is not in any way to stir up guilt, because sometimes you don't have a choice as a parent, and I get that. And so I'm not vilifying or blaming or saying, if we are doing this to children, what's wrong with you? I'm saying collectively, as a society, we have got to figure out how to take better care of our children, our small children especially, not just on a physical level, but on an energetic level, because they need adults. They need loving, consistent, caring adults that they can sit in. They need to sit in your lap. They need to be hugged. They need to be snuggled in healthy ways, because that's essential for the healthy development of their energy field. So let's break down the chakra development, because when children are born, their chakra, as I said, their chakras are immature, their energy field is immature, and different parts of the energy field will flash on and off and expand and shrink depending on what the developmental task is for each season of a child's development. So at birth, children are born with a large crown chakra. By the way, this is all information that I learned in my training that I took with Barbara Brennan at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. If you are familiar with her work or her books, she has a book called Hands of Light, which is a great book if you feel like you want to learn more about hands-on healing. So this was information that I learned a long time ago that I find to be still incredibly important and really valid for what I teach, especially when we're talking about families and child development. So at birth, a baby has a large crown chakra, it's kind of out of balance, and a little teeny tiny root center, and not much in between. So they're energetically, they're really still connected, right, to source. They're really still kind of traveling in and out of the body and deciding, in a lot of cases, whether they're actually going to stay and do this earth story or not. That's why they sleep a lot, right? When they're sleeping, they're kind of traveling, they're astral projecting, and they're kind of checking in, and they're still downloading the mission code and figuring out, am I going to do this or not, right? And so we have to really be mindful of the energy around which we place small children. And they're not, babies, newborn babies are not really grounded, which is why, again, staying close to mama or dad and being in that physically close space really helps them get grounded and get, anchor their energy field into the body. There are a lot of developmental milestones between birth and the first year of life, right? We're not going to cover those because, again, we're not looking at developmental milestones, but definitely in our family coach certification training program, we also talk about developmental milestones. From birth to first year. From birth to the first year, because the brain just grows like crazy in that first year. But when we look at the energetic development, the next really big cycle or season, as the baby finally gets grounded and the crown chakra starts to shrink a little bit, is the year between the time between the first and the second year of life. So when they begin to walk and be toddlers, that crown chakra grows smaller. Their root center, they get more grounded. That root center grows bigger. And now they get the heart chakra starts to open up a little bit, right? And they start to get a really big opening in the solar plexus chakra. Now, remember that the solar plexus chakra has the theme of empowerment, right? It has the theme of empowerment. And so one of the developmental tasks of a toddler is to learn how to become powerful in the world, right? Now, remember, when we're talking about power, we're talking about appropriate power. So I want to be really clear that anytime we talk about these big developmental milestones, we're talking about it through the lens of appropriate expression. So appropriate power for a 1 or a 2-year-old is, being able to stand on a stool and flip a light switch on and off. That's a pretty powerful thing to do. Or being given a plant that you can water yourself, or being allowed to choose green pants or blue pants, right? Those are the kinds of things that feed a small child's need for power. And if you think about it, what are some of the things, what's the first word, one of the first words of, a toddler learns to say? No, I won't, right? No. That matures. Children go through a second power stage around early adolescence. So when they're little, they say no. When they're a little bit bigger, they say, no, I won't, and you can't make me, right? So those are all really, really important things to foster in a child in a healthy way, because when they can learn to say yes to the things they want to say yes to and no to the things they want to say no to, not only does that feed their sense of power and they grow into an understanding of what is appropriate for them in terms of being powerful in the world, they also stay connected to the body. If you think about human design, one of the things that we do so much in the beginning of our human design journey is practice strategy and authority for our type. Well, the purpose of strategy and authority is to get you back in your body. It's to get you back into that place where you feel viscerally, physically, what feels right for me and what doesn't. What is a yes for me in my body and what is a no for me in my body. And what happens is when we overpower children, and we do it pretty easily, it's easy to overpower small children, right? And we don't stop and we don't pause and we don't hear that need for appropriate power. What we ultimately end up doing is disconnecting them from their physical compass, that inner visceral gut level trust in what feels good and right for them and what doesn't. And so finding that healthy balance in this season of a small child's life is really essential for their long-term ability to be able to be resilient, to stand up for themselves and stay true to themselves. This journey continues between the second and the third year when we get this continued expansion of the solar plexus chakra. And again, because we cultivate this sense of empowerment, this theme of power, and that theme of power comes from emotional energy. And I want to be really clear, this is not feelings, because they also have feelings, right? This is the visceral, remember the solar plexus is about awareness about decision making, right? Solar plexus, or emotional authority, is about feeling when something feels right or not. These toddlers, and later on in the preteen and teen years, they are learning how to trust what they feel in the body. They're not necessarily just emoting for the sake of expressing emotions. That happens when they're 4, right? When they're throwing a fit, it's because their body is saying, no, 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 no. And we have to figure out, how do we support that that no in a healthy way, or that yes in a healthy way, without also losing our marbles as parents, right? And we have to bring into, this is the tricky part, we have to bring into our own relationship with this kid, our own sense of empowerment, because this oftentimes is what gets triggered for us when we have kids in this age. Because when our kids are resisting us and power struggling with us, and if we didn't get to have good, healthy power when we were growing up, that's the time when we're like, hey, wait a minute, I'm the parent now. I'm supposed to be the one in charge, and now this kid isn't letting me be in charge, and here we have yet another person trying to tell me I'm not in charge. And we can get into power struggles if we're not clear about our own power issues and our own power boundaries, and struggle sometimes to empower our children in healthy ways if we haven't cleaned our own stuff up about our own inner sense of empowerment. We also start to see at this age the beginning of the opening of the third eye, or the Ajna, and the sacral chakra. So with the sacral chakra, sometimes you'll see, very innocent exploration of genitalia, right? And that's all part of that sacral chakra opening up. We also see the beginning of the third eye opening. And what happens a lot of times is when children's third eye begins to open, or that Ajna begins to open, they start to cultivate or experience spiritual sight. And children are so clear, and they're so bright, and they're so attractive to spiritual energy that sometimes they're going to see through the veil, if you will, and those things will scare them sometimes, especially as this continues when they get to be 4. Being afraid is very normal when you're 4, right? But they will start to see things, and they'll start to not know necessarily how to interpret it, or they'll see, they'll see beyond the veil. And sometimes they'll say things to you that lets you know that, oh, also they remember past life stuff. That's one of my daughters, my middle daughter, when she was about this age, I got her out of the bathtub and I was drying her off, and she said to me, do you remember last time when I was here and I was the mom and you were the kid? I liked that better, right? And she doesn't have any recollection of that. But, at that point in time, she was still really connected to the whole spectrum of her soul life, right? And that's not an uncommon experience in this age. From the 3rd to the 5th year, we see the solar plexus start to decrease, so the power struggling piece starts to settle down. The heart chakra starts to open, because now we have a child that's kind of ready to start going out into the world a little bit. They're starting to make friends. They're doing more than just parallel play. They're starting to make connections with other kids and be friends with other kids. So that heart chakra starts to open, the throat chakra starts to open. They're better able to speak and to articulate and tell you about who they are and what they're doing and what they know. And of course, that third eye continues to open. And certainly I would say in this season, probably more than any season in our development, this is where we learn about fear. Because we do see so much and we don't always have the wisdom yet to interpret what it is that we're seeing. And so it's really normal during this time for kids to be suddenly afraid of things that they weren't afraid of before. My 4-year-old grandson right now proclaims that he's afraid of heights. I took him on the Ferris wheel at the county fair this weekend, and he was like clinging very violently to my pant leg. Like he was literally white knuckling his way around the Ferris wheel, clinging to my pant leg. And the whole time we're going around the Ferris wheel, he's saying, "There's no way we can fall, right? There's no way we can fall, right?" That's like a classic 4-year-old, right? He wanted to do it, but he's also kind of afraid. And certainly 4-year-olds are also cultivating a sense of their own mortality. I mean, when my niece was this age, she was very much afraid of death, and she was always calling 911, right? And 911 was always being called to the house because she was afraid she was dying for different reasons. So fear is normal here, and part of that fear is because of this third eye piece that they're still seeing and don't always know how to interpret what they're seeing. And what we tell them oftentimes is, "Oh, don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of." And we don't realize that they need that reassurance. They actually need us to take their hand and give them a flashlight and go into the closet and look around and see there's nothing in the closet, there's nothing under the bed, and to support that in a healthy way, because we're teaching them how to be courageous, which is one of those resiliency keys, right? Courage is a resiliency key. And we have to know how to help them manage this really important season, because if they don't, then they internalize that fear and they think there's something wrong with them for being afraid, instead of learning how to work with that fear and cultivate courage. In the 5th through the 7th year, the power or the sacral chakra shrinks back to a balanced size. So not just the sacral, but the emotional solar plexus as well. So all these needs for power kind of shrink to a balanced size. The heart continues to open. The throat is still small, but continues to open. And by the time they end the season at 7, all the energy centers are open without protective screens. And they're really ready at that point to kind of go out into the world. Honestly, if I was going to design a school system, which I don't really feel the need to, because I think there are a couple of really good school systems out there that I think really address these basic needs of children. I would certainly say Waldorf education definitely addresses these seasons in children and child development. So does Montessori to a certain degree. But really when we get to the end of this 7th year, we have a child that's very ready and grounded and energetically present and able to go out in the world and make connections and understand power and empowerment, who can speak and articulate and really understand what they're seeing and how to process. And certainly, everything that we need to give them to start really rooting down in resiliency is actually laid down in these first 7 years. And we often think so many times in parenting that pushing kids out rather than holding them close. We talk about, we use the word a lot, you're spoiling them. You're spoiling your kids when you hold them close. And I also have to remind people, things spoil in your refrigerator when you don't pay attention to them, right? We have oh my God, we had like a major cucumber spoilage this year because we had so many cucumbers in the garden, right? The cucumbers spoiled because we couldn't pay attention to them. You don't spoil kids in this season from birth to 7 by giving them too much attention. They really need that connection and that closeness. And if we could structure societal systems and collective systems and family systems in such a way that we really protect these 7 years, we would give our children a much different foundation from which to grow and thrive from. The last developmental season energetically that I want to talk about is adolescence. During adolescence, you can have a closure or a shrinking of the crown chakra. So if you've ever had a kid that was really spiritual and woo-woo, and suddenly they became a teenager and they were like, whatever, That's actually because sometimes that crown chakra closes. And part of that, I think, is really just because they're focusing more on the earth self and not the soul self. That usually reopens somewhere around 17 as they get ready to go out into the world. The heart chakra at this age can be large and somewhat out of balance. Friends and new budding love relationships become really important. And that solar plexus chakra can also be out of balance because, again, developmentally, we're going through another season. Power is so important. We go through two distinctly different developmental seasons as children to learn about power. When we're in adolescence, our teenagers are learning about personal power. Remember when we were working with personal power with toddlers, it was no, right? Because I don't want to, right? And now when we're talking about adolescence, they're saying no because they don't feel like it. And they'll tell you that, I don't feel like it, right? And finding, again, that balance between, hey, I want to honor how it feels to you so that you can trust your own authority in your own body. And at the same time, setting healthy boundaries and setting limitations. And actually, teenagers need this more than ever for many, many reasons, right? And one of the most important reasons why they need boundaries is because it cultivates self-worth. Good, healthy boundaries teach a teen that they are loved. And it's kind of why both permissive parenting and authoritarian parenting don't really work, because authoritarian parenting has really rigid and boundaries that are too harsh, and permissive parenting doesn't have any boundaries. And really, kids need sort of a middle ground between those two styles of parenting. And so learning how to do this and do this well. And again, sometimes that means you have to unpack all of your own conditioning around power and power and teen, being a parent of a teen and power can be tricky and part of navigating this season with your kid, because you have to be able to meet your child with good boundaries, healthy boundaries that are kind of like backbones that bend and flow as needed and aren't too rigid or too soft. So I would love for you, I'm going to talk a little bit about the family coach certification training. And while I'm talking, I want you to listen carefully because I'm going to share some things with you. But I also want to remind you, please, 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 if you have questions, now is a really good time for you to put them in the Q&A box. So if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A button. Put your questions in the Q&A box because I'll miss them if they're in the chat. So the thing I really want to start with today, or really kind of communicate, is that the goal of parenting is to support children in learning appropriate ways to get their energy needs met. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in the family coach certification training is how do you work with children at each stage of development to help them get those energy needs met, and how do you work with misbehavior and see it as a form of communication and experimentation. And it's hard, and it's creative, and it's empowering, and it's beautiful. And I want to just say, as we think about coaching families and working with families and supporting families and parents and learning how to do this, learning how to parent energetically, I want to just say, we're all feeling whatever's happening on the planet right now. And I say whatever's happening because I'm at a point where I don't even know what's happening, except that it's unraveling, right? The economy's unraveling, families are stretched thin, parents are overwhelmed. The systems that are supposed to support us, like the healthcare system, the education system, mental health systems even, they're all also in crisis. My 16-year-old went through a pretty difficult mental health challenge a couple of years ago. It took us almost 8 months to get a therapy appointment, which was terrifying because she needed help and I couldn't, it was really difficult for us to tap into it. We can't just sit back and wait for the old paradigm to fix itself, because I don't think it's going to. The truth is, we have to create something new. As parents, as coaches, we have to create a new economy, a new way of parenting, a new way of educating, a new way that allows us to support people in restoring connection, maintaining resilience, and heal people on a deep level. I keep saying, it's time for the healers to be in charge. We cannot let these outdated systems that are external to us, we can't let these old systems control us anymore. It is time for us to create our own personal economy, an economy that is rooted in service, rooted in good work in the world. We have to bust old paradigms about doing work that is good in the world and knowing that we can do good work in the world in the new economy in such a way that it supports and sustains us while we support and sustain other people. That's what this training is about. And it's not just a training. It's not just another credential. It's actually a step-by-step system that's going to equip you to help you break family cycles, that's going to help you help parents heal old wounds and teach them exactly how to create harmony at home. And at the same time, I'm going to teach you how to build a sustainable career during a time when this work is needed more than ever. So what you're going to get in this training is 8 recorded training modules that come with 10 live calls with me and worksheets and workshops that are going to help you master the system. You're going to get certification and support. So included in this training are several paths of certification, which also translate to several paths of income and support for you. So you'll be receiving trainings in quantum human design levels 1 and level 2. So you'll be able to give human design readings. You'll get trained as a parenting by design facilitator. So you'll be trained in actually how to teach this entire program called Parenting by Design. And believe me, there's no reinventing the wheel here. You literally get a business in a box, if you will. You get recordings, you get videos if you want to show them, you get a workbook, you get a specific training program that all you have to do is literally teach it. You don't even have to teach it. You can just play the videos and have a discussion group. You'll get the Quantum Human Design Family Coach certification training. That gives you the skill set to really be able to work individually or in groups with people, and a private coaching circle community that allows you to be in community with other coaches to get mentorship and to get opportunities to share your own experiences or even case studies in a supportive environment. This is a program that's going to give you impact. So if you've been wanting to figure out how can I make a difference in the world and a clear career path, doing good work in the world, I'm going to give you a step-by-step framework that you can immediately use to serve families. It's not just theory. You're going to learn through this tested system skills that you can put into action right away that can help parents right away. So as I said, you get 8 recorded training modules and a workbook, 10 live calls with me, plus of course the recorded programming. You're going to get a 2-day live workshop on how to teach parenting by design. You're going to get quantum human design certification levels 1 and 2. You're going to become a parenting by design facilitator package. You're going to become members of our family coach. I know this, I can't say this today, family coach circle community. And if you add all that up, that's more than $10,000 worth of training. And you get it if you register before September 26th, you'll get it for 33% off of the full price, which is $4,997. You'll get it for $3,348. That's a $1,600 savings. But here's the thing that I forgot to share with you yesterday. So hang on. We have hoodies. We have hoodies. We have Army of Love hoodies. So I want to share with you what this is about. So in the very beginning of my human design career, I learned very quickly that there was no way I was going to be able to do what I wanted to do in the world, and I want to change the world. I couldn't do it by myself. I, Karen Parker, cannot single-handedly transform the world, but I can train people who can join me in creating an army of love that is here to share and transmit this message of empowerment, this message of authenticity, this message of creativity, this message of love. Because I believe that if we're all creating from a healthy G center, which is where love lives, right? When we love ourselves, when we have a sense of empowerment, when we understand our unique place in the world, when we let go of the past and take back control of our own story, when we're creating from source, when we're physically vital, when we're allowing ourselves to be supported in doing the work that we are called to do, when we are operating with compassion, if we're all doing that, we're going to be fine. The planet will be fine, right? So I wanted to build an army of love, people who could spread the message of love with the world. So the first 20 people who register and pay in full for the Family Coach Certification Training Program are going to receive an Army of Love hoodie. You'll also receive free enrollment in our Passion and Profit program, which is a really very grounded step-by-step system that teaches you how to build your website, how to write sales copy, how to do social media marketing, how to get your first client, and start building a steady stream of clients. We're going to teach you how to do your business because that's a whole separate skill set, right? Coaching is great and it's fun and we love that and we're all really good at that and you'll learn how to do that in spades. The building the business piece is a whole separate skill set and we have to talk about that too because you deserve to have a good thriving business because it allows you to keep doing the work that you love. So I forgot to tell you that yesterday. That's my big reveal for today. So I guess what we call a fast action bonus. First 20 people who sign up, pay full price, you get a hoodie and the Passion and Profit program, which is such an incredible program. By the way, that program was designed and is taught by a projector. So if you're like, oh, I can't, I'm a projector. How do I do business as a projector? We will teach you how to do business as a projector and also as a manifester and a generator and a manifesting generator. So awesome. All right. So I think we're ready for questions. Do we have questions, Hannah?
We have a lot of questions coming in.
Oh,
Yeah.
I bet.
I do want to start before we get too far into the Q&A box. I want to address our YouTube question that came in, and it
Okay.
is related to the program. Um, so we have someone who's in Norway asking about the dates and times of the call schedule, and when the 2-day live event will be, and related to Passion and Profit, if which website we teach in that course. So I'll address these technical parts, Karen.
Okay.
And for anyone who's wondering about the Family Coach program, we do kick off the live training on October 8th at 12 p.m. Central. So we do a kickoff call. You get to come, you get to meet everyone who's in the live cohort and set intentions and really get yourself set up to move on this training journey. So we kick off the program on October 8th. And then from there, we have about 3 live calls a month. So we'll start at the end of October with our first module call, and then we'll do 3 calls a month and through January of 2026. And those calls are on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Central, and they are 90-minute sessions. If you can't be there live with us, or you have a work schedule conflict or time zone conflict, you can pre-submit a question, you can watch replays. You can hop on when you can. They are not required for your certification. They are just there to offer additional really nice live support. And you also get practice time with other students looking at charts, looking at um, real case study examples of how to put all of this into practice. And then we do wrap up the program with a 2-day workshop that's in February, February 11th and 12th, 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time. So
Mhm.
again, that's all recorded for you. That's where Dr. Karen goes through the Parenting by Design program. You learn how to teach it, how to host it, how to take yourself through it, or just have your own personal experience as well. And then we provide you with all the materials to go off and lead it and lead the way in your army of love hoodie. So um,
I also think the other
yeah,
thing to mention too, Hannah, is, especially if you're not able to attend the live calls, you are also welcome to bring your questions to our weekly forum. So for any of our Quantum Human Design Pro students, we have on Mondays a weekly live forum where you can bring questions, and then that forum once a month also meets in the evenings. So if you're in a different time zone, if you're in like Australia, New Zealand, Asia, that evening call is specifically held at that time to make sure you have an opportunity to join a live call as well.
yes. So that is a little bit more of an overview. And if you have any questions or you need to hear that again or see that again, just email us at support@quantumhumandesign.com. And we can also post that on YouTube for you to see the dates as well.
Mhm.
And then related to your passion and profit question, um, we use the website building platform is named Card. So that's what we use in the program. But if you work with a different hosting service, you also get a lot of support. We have people in our Facebook group who use Wix or other Kajabi and all of that. And so we have great orchestrators who are in that program leading the way and providing you with a lot of resources and information on how to apply the business building to what you're doing in your work. So,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted to address those questions. Now let's get to, okay, how important is profile in the kids' charts? Do they come fully online in their chart more as adults?
No, I mean, I would say they come fully online at 7. And I would say know your child's profile and work with your child's profile because you'll see little threads of it showing up for sure, for sure. You know, you're going to look at your child's type and see certain threads of type coming up before they turn 7. And I think it's important to understand that when a child is really young, before the age of 7, learning can happen in multiple ways. When they hit 7, that's when they tend to solidify and really sit more strongly in their profiles. Let's look at the third line as an example, right? The third line learning style is to experiment and explore. Well, in reality, all kids, all small children especially, need to experiment and explore. Watch a baby, right? And they're when you see a baby trying to start putting a ball inside a bin, when they're sitting and they've got a little ball and they're trying to put the ball back in the basket, right? They don't get it right the first time and they have to keep doing it and they have to keep doing it. I think the other part that we have to talk about, this is hard. It's not hard, it's a brain bender because I think sometimes when we think about human design, we lock ourselves into thinking that the chart is a labeling system, right? This person is a this and therefore that. And really, that chart is not a labeling system. It's a map for how you really process energy. It's a map of potential. And really, when we start to look at the chart through layers and the lens of layers, which is how I teach it. So we look at resiliency keys, then we look at type, and then we look at authority, then we look at the profiles, and we look at the centers, and we look at the gates and the channels, which we don't get through all the complicated stuff in this training. But when you look at the chart as a layered tool, you'll also start to see that some of those themes repeat themselves. So we have our human journey, our human brain development, which requires experimentation and exploration and practice and repetition. Then we have our energetic journey, our human design journey. And honestly, that story of repetition and practice and experimentation plays out in multiple layers. But to answer your question, when they turn 7, that profile lands. And that's really important because at 7 in school is when they're really doing those big developmental tasks like reading and math. And if we don't understand our child's learning style at that age, that's where a chunk of kids start getting labeled as being learning disabled. And I have found in my years of practice with coaching people, coaching families, that oftentimes that label that gets put on a child at 7 that's a learning disability is really just an energy challenge or an energy. It's just a difference in learning style and how they process energy. And when we understand, okay, this is a kid that needs integration, right? The integration shows up in many layers in the chart. This is never going to be a kid that's going to get it in the moment. And this is a kid that's going to need to come home or need to go out and play and move their body a little bit before the concept lands. And if you understand that about your child and you're starting to do things like read or do math, then you have to really make sure that they're in an environment where the teacher understands, hey, he's probably not going to get the math problem first time out the chute. He's probably going to need to hear the little Latin math lesson. And then he's going to need to go outside and play because that's how some kids integrate. Or he maybe needs to go home and then wait a week or two, before we can really see the concept land in his body and in his brain. So, I'm sorry I get really passionate about this because I just get so heartbroken when I see these kids that get these labels at such an early age. And really the issue is that we're trying to use a one size fits all approach to learning and it doesn't work for every kid. It only works for some kids. And just because you don't fit the system doesn't mean you're wrong. It means the system's not working. So, okay, done.
Okay, next question. Dr. Karen Parker talked in her previous videos and also in this about the energy centers and their development. My question is, well, the change in the energy centers in 2027. Okay, so how will this influence our own stories and also the way of parenting? And then someone else asked about 2027 if they should wait to take the course until
Oh no, don't wait.
2027.
Don't wait. Okay, so let's talk about that because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings about 2027. And there's a lot of, I think, okay, so let's all stop for just a second. And let's remember that we are deeply conditioned by logic. We are. We're just deeply conditioned by logic. And that means that we are deeply conditioned to think linearly and sequentially. That's what we got rewards for in school. We got good grades when we could think linearly and sequentially. Evolution takes time. And the mutation and the evolution that we are in the middle of actually started about 120 years ago. So you're already in the thick of it and you have grown up in it. And really the parameter that needs to be stabilized and sustained in parenting is that we have to raise kids that stay connected to their inner authority. That's really it. We have to raise kids that stay connected to their inner authority because our children and our grandchildren and us in our own story, we have to get back to navigating with the wisdom of our visceral senses, not just our logic. Logic has its place. I'm definitely not, I mean, I'm a scientist. I'm not going to rule out logic. I like logic, right? But we have to stay connected here in the heart and in the body. And we have to preserve that in our kids. Please, can we preserve that in our kids? Because when they lose that connection, I really truly believe that is a big source of their anxiety. Because if they lose that connection, they're looking at a world that looks pretty messed up materially. They're looking at the actual physical world and they're supposed to be like inheriting that and taking that over. How are they going to know what to do? We can't figure it out. How are they going to figure it out? But if we teach, if we preserve, we don't have to teach them. If we preserve in them that connection to their heart, that connection to that compass, that deep connection with inner knowing, their strategy and authority, their body's response, then they can stay present. And when they can stay present, then they'll know what they need to know when they need to know it, and they can combat anxiety, they can stay resilient, they can cultivate equanimity in the face of challenges, and they can stay aligned with their purpose and with meaning. And that we have research about this, right? We have research that shows if kids can do that, they're fine. They're fine.
Okay, next question. I don't have a clear path towards teaching HD to people or families, but as a 5/1 generator, I love learning, and this has been so helpful for myself to learn and work with my own family. How much would this training be helpful if I'm not looking to move forward in business with it?
If you're still going to have impact, you're still going to be a resource in your community. You know, for the first, I have to do math now, like the first 10 years of my parenting journey, this was not what I did for a living. I was in the trenches, you know, with raising kids and homeschooling kids because I homeschooled my kids for 11 years. But I was still a parent educator. I didn't do much teaching. I didn't do much parent education at that point because I was home with kids and that was my job. But I was a resource, right? I was a resource for my homeschool group. I was a resource in my community. People would call me up. My sister-in-law would call me up. I was a resource. You would be a resource for the people you love. You would be a resource for people in your community. You would also, I think, you know, just kind of looking at the personal benefits, you would also really continue to deepen your own understanding of your own story so that you could show up for your kids or your grandkids or the children in your lives in a more authentic and present way.
Okay, next question. Do any of your coaches combine these systems with other systems?
Oh, all, yeah, lots of them. I want them to, right? I always say human design is the grammar. It's not the thing, it's the grammar. Please add whatever thing else you know. We've definitely had people that have done body code. We've had people that have been family constellation specialists. We've had people, just all kinds of different backgrounds. Yeah.
Therapists, teachers, parents.
Hmm. Educators. We have a one Ellen Hefty, who's written several children's books, is a principal and an educator and has done a lot of work in bringing human design into the school system. So yeah,
Okay. Does a premature birth have an influence on a child and human?
you just muted yourself.
Did I not
Sorry.
say it? Okay.
I
Does
mean,
a premature birth have an influence on a child and human design?
I would say in human design, no, because your birthday and your unconscious birthday are all calculated based on when your feet leave your mother's body. And I would certainly say energetically, it's going to stretch out that first year of big crown chakra, little root chakra. It makes that year long cycle a little bit longer, which is why, you know, So when okay, I just have to. This is a weird story, but when I was in nursing school, I was part of a research study that I thought was hilarious. I still think it's kind of hilarious. And the research study was researching the impact of physical touch, physical loving touch on premature babies. And the conclusion was babies do better when we touch them. And I was like, you all should have just gone and asked my grandmother, right? My grandmother would have been able to answer this without doing research. But the piece that I think is really important when we look at this in the context of energetic development is these babies, these little babies in these incubators, these premature babies, they're in this very vulnerable state where they're not grounded. And when we touch them and we hold them and we can, bring them into our embrace, first of all, they're borrowing our energy field, right? Which all small children are doing. But they're also getting that physical grounding touch to help bring the nervous system in and regulate it at an early level.
Okay. What are some best practices for parenting a manifesting generator child with emotional authority, especially when they resist structure or routine?
Well, so we'll talk about some of that tomorrow. A manifesting generator with emotional authority is most likely going to have the mistaken motivation of power, meaning they need to feel empowered in how you parent them. And so that's probably where some of that resistance to structure is coming from. I'd have to know how old this child is to completely answer this question. Um, but I would certainly say some things to think about. Empowerment, just empowerment. How can you find something every week that you can empower this child to do for themselves that you're doing for them? I would certainly say, and this is a concept we actually teach in the program, this is a child that needs a self-quieting space. And this is a concept that I teach not only for kids but for adults too. And so this actually comes from the work of Rudolf Dreikurs. Rudolf Dreikurs said that everybody in your household needs to have a space in their house that belongs to them exclusively, that's their space for self-quieting. And one of the things that I did with my family, and I taught other families to do, is that each child gets to pick and choose and create their own self-quieting space. So I had one kid, and again, it depends on how big your kid is. I had one kid who picked a kitchen cabinet. We had these big, deep kitchen cabinets. So we took everything out of the kitchen cabinet. Her self-quieting space was in this kitchen cabinet. She had her pillow and her blankie in there, and and a flashlight, and that's where she would retreat. My other kid, another kid that loved to put tablecloths over the table and crawl under the table, and that was their self-quieting space. I had another kid who was very creative and artistic, and he had a space in his room with all kinds of colored markers and a little cassette player. At the time it was cassette players, where he could play music. Really, he was like sad, dramatic music, and draw in color when he was really dysregulated. And it's not something you can just teach and do right away. It's sort of a process of retraining your child to recognize, I'm dysregulated, I'm out of control, I need to take myself to self-quieting before I really do anything else, so that I don't punch my brother or break something or scream at my mom. And you as a family learn to internalize and really become self-quieters. You learn to really use this process of self-quieting. I would also say, and we'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow too, some things you can do is, again, ask yourself, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if my child doesn't do this? Because sometimes letting go of your fixed position is what your child needs in that situation, depending where they are developmentally. The second thing you can do is there an opportunity whenever you're faced with a power struggle to offer this child some choices, because choices can be really empowering, again, depending on how old they are. By the way, teenagers like choices too. So give your teenagers choices. They act like they don't, but they'll be like, oh, a choice, cool, because what they really want is power, right? You're going to have to allow your kid to experience the natural consequences of their choices sometimes, particularly when they make choices that are not so great, because that helps them learn and find ways to, in a respectful way, talk through those choices so they start to use those choices as opportunities for learning. But as I said, that's probably just some quick things. I would also say, if you have a child that's really doing power and it's bugging you, it's often that kid that's mirroring back your own mistaken motivations. So I might lovingly and gently also invite you to explore, do you have some power issues that maybe need some gentle exploration and healing, so that that dynamic isn't coming out in your parent-child dynamic. So
Okay. How to work with our older children's inner child. Where do we start? Thank you.
Mm, that's such a huge question. I'm going to actually table that question because I'm going to actually teach a class on inner child work in 2 weeks, I think, right? In two
Yes,
weeks.
or
So
September 26th, actually.
on
We'll have
September the 26th, I'm teaching a class. This is a secret. You're not supposed to know this yet, but I'm going to be teaching a 1 hour, 90-minute-ish class on inner child stuff. And it would actually apply to to your kids. Yeah, they can apply to kids. Here's the thing I'll tell you about that though. If your kids are doing inner child work, and I know this because mine have done it too, you have got to get a can of emotional Teflon and spray it all over you because they're going to want to tell you things about their pain and pain that happened oftentimes as a result of your parenting or the situation that you were in when you were raising them. And your job is to hold space for their feelings and to not be defensive. Whoo, is that hard? That is hard. So if you can do that, get that can of emotional Teflon and spray it on so you can be a loving presence. Because oh my gosh, whoo, it hurts when you hear how hurt they are and you're like, oh my God, I did that. All right, that sucks. And again, self-compassion, compassion for your child, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we have more questions about adults healing relationships to our own parents. Did we do that in this course? Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I would say we don't specifically focus on inner child work in this course. I will say it's inevitable. You do inner child work in this course. In
yeah.
fact, I will tell every time I've taught this course, about 3 or 4 lessons in, we have to take a pause on the curriculum and spend a lesson, a Q&A session talking about inner child stuff because it does come up. You start to see, oh, I could have had this as a parenting model. And there's grief. We get triggered with grief and sadness about, I didn't have that. And you really learn to sort of understand what happened in the dynamic with your own parents and heal that through just getting the information of how different it could be. A lot of times we just don't know how it could be different. And when you start to see how it could be different, that can be actually a very empowering exploration and a very healing exploration.
Okay, my kiddo is almost 13, and I think she would really benefit from an HD reading to prep her and keep her connected to herself during these tumultuous teen years, especially since she is a splenic projector. Do you recommend a
Mm-hmm.
reading for teens, and does the course cover working with adolescents or readings for adolescents?
I will say we don't teach you how to read for teens. I know that some of our human design specialists do read for teens. Um, who do I know? I mean, I would imagine that Ellen Hefty might, um, April Porter might. Um, I'll go look at our list of specialists and make sure I talk about who's doing readings for teens tomorrow. I definitely would recommend that you get one, um, get a reading for your teen. I'm not saying we don't, why not do teens? I'm not sure I understand that question, Tracy. We do teach about teens. We talk about parenting teens a lot because that's oftentimes a flashpoint in the parenting relationship for sure. We talk about human design. I would say that doing a reading for a teenager is going to be a little bit different than doing a reading for an adult. I do not specifically teach people how to do human design chart readings for teens, but in this program, you're going to learn about what do teens need, how does that show up in the chart, and you certainly could do readings for teens. I just don't specifically teach people, here's how you do a reading for a teenager. Yeah.
Would this be something we could teach to educators in school?
Oh yeah. If you know how to get into schools and teach educators, for sure. For sure. I actually, the school where my daughter goes, is my plug for the school again. Youth Initiative High School, Viroqua, Wisconsin. School. It's a cool school. Your kids will meditate in school. That school, by the way, is located less than 5 feet away from a K through 8 Waldorf school. So if you have smaller kids, they can go to the Waldorf school. The big kids can go to Youth Initiative. In that school, I actually have done in services for all the teachers. I'm actually going to do a story lab they're doing a whole course on hero's journey in January. I'm going to go teach a story lab. So they've integrated human design in the curriculum. I've definitely done in services for schools that have integrated human design into the curriculum. It's definitely possible and definitely needed. And if you feel called to do that, I definitely want you in this program because we need people who are on the ground teaching in schools. So,
Okay. No, we are just about time and we still need to do the poll and our winners.
yes,
Okay.
let's
So,
do our poll and winners. And as you're taking time to fill out the poll, Hannah's going to share with us our recipients for today's giveaway. Today's giveaway is winning a quantum human design set of cards, a red human understanding human design book, a blue human design workbook book, and the encyclopedia of quantum human design. That's a nice haul there. So these are our winners from yesterday. Tomorrow we'll have another round of recipients. So today,
okay, congratulations to Marlena Eckelbesh. I know I butchered that, but Marlena E, we will email you. And Marilyn Lester, we will also be reaching out to you. So congrats to our day one winners. We will also pick two more winners from today's call. I know there's still questions that are left from today. Just come back tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll go into more of the energy needs and unmet energy needs,
mhm.
and also take more of your training questions as well. And if you have anything that you're curious about, or you're a current student and you have questions about adding family coach to your QHD training, just send us an email at support@quantumhumandesign.com. Oh, yay, Marlene is jumping up and down. She wanted to win. Okay.
Oh, yay! Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yes, good, awesome. Tomorrow we'll be talking about decoding your child's behavior. By the way, this works really well for partners, husbands, wives, people that drive you nuts in the grocery store, people at work. You're going to learn to understand the secrets behind why do people do the things they do, including your kids, and you're going to walk away with your mind blown. Make sure you bring charts tomorrow. You will need charts tomorrow. So bring charts tomorrow, get your kids' charts tomorrow. Again, freehumandesignchart.com. If you don't have your kids' charts, make sure you get your kids' charts too. So, all right, be well. We'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.